right, I'm gonna fire that off the stream, and we'll see. I don't think I've got anyone on here right now. It sure would be good if we had someone on, but we'll see. Okay, it does look like it's picking up, so I'm seeing feedback. So we'll go with this, and I'll do a quick intro. Hey everybody! Hello! Attention! Hey everybody! Sorry, I jumped out and scared everyone. So we do have a presentation that's about to get started. Just wanted to introduce the guy. This is Hugo Picard. He's with Fermentis. Fermentis is a giant yeast manufacturer out of France, near Belgium. He's coming in. He actually came in for the Craft Brewers Conference, and I spoke with him over email. He decided to make a special trip to Baton Rouge. So, I mean, really, really cool thing to do. I think that's pretty awesome. Maybe give him a quick hand for that. So what we'll be doing is it's about a 45-minute, I believe, presentation. This is going to be on biotransformation, and he'll get more into the details on that. But certainly, if you've got some good tips on food or drinks that Hugo needs to try while he's in here, I'm sure y'all give some good recommendations. Show him a little Louisiana hospitality. But without any further ado, Hugo. Obviously, move this wherever you need, and let's get you set back up with that. Sorry, go down here. Yeah, hit the PowerPoint right there, and then that guy. Yeah, and then you can maximize that. Perfect. There you go. And you should be able to just use the arrows. Might be more predictable. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So,
the little piece in the middle, that's turn that to the right type.
thank you. So yeah, I was saying hello, everyone. So for the next hour, we will discuss together about yeast and interaction with hops and how maximize the hop capacities in your beer. But before all, here I can use literally the expression pardon my French, like you will hear my accent for the next hour, so sorry about that. And before to enter deeply into our topic at the end of the day, I will start by introduce myself first. So at Fermentis, I'm the home division manager, meaning that globally I'm in charge to support home brewers, or winemaker, or cider maker in their hobby at home. I'm based in Lille, in France. You will see some pictures of the city in a few slides. And trying to come to the US 6 times a year. Before to arrive at Fermentis, so I'm agronomic engineer. I've been graduated from the Superior Institute of Agriculture in France. I have also done a second master degree in marketing at the School of Management of Lille in France. And I have brewing and winemaking experiences both in France and New Zealand because I lived during 1 year in New Zealand. So today we will cover the following topic. I will give you a few words about what is the Fermentis Academy because all the study you will see there are based on their work. We will do a few reminders about yeast and fermentation basics. We will explore the art of fermentation through different examples of study between yeast and hops. And at the end, I'll be happy to answer to all the questions you could have. Could be about this presentation or about any other topics. But let's start by talking about what is Fermentis and what is the Fermentis Academy. So here you have the first picture of our headquarters in Lille, France. We have built this building like 4 years ago, and you will see a few pictures of the inside in a few slides. But starting from the big group, maybe you know, maybe not, but Fermentis is what we call a business unit inside Le SAF. Le SAF is the giant group, and the job of Le SAF is to do everything they can with yeast and microorganisms. And we have different business units. The main business is baking. 1 bread out of 3 in the world is made with Le SAF yeast. In the US, you probably know Red Star. Red Star is our brand for the US. But we also deal with, for example, animal care, with filial agroxine for plant care, analysts for ingredients in food, generally speaking. Biospranger is like yeast derivative. We use this company for winemaking, but also, for example, the barbecue flavor you can have in your chips are coming from yeast derivatives. And we, as Fermentis, we are one business unit dedicated to fermented beverages. And as a business unit, it's what we are doing. We deal with all this universe, wine, beer, spirits, cider, but also other beverages like coffee, kefir, very local beverage time to time. And we work with industrial, such as Heineken, ABI, etc., craft brewers, and also, of course, home brewers. And it's important to remember that Le SAF is the giant company, but Fermentis is only one business unit. And maybe, do you have an idea how many people we are at Fermentis?
1,000, 3,000?
Yeah, many people think that we are minimum 1,000 people. In fact, we are 100. And for the home, I'm the only one for the entire world. And inside Fermentis, you have what we call the Fermentis Academy. So the Fermentis Academy is located in the heart of the Fermentis campus, the building you have seen before. And the mission of the Fermentis Academy is to explore and share the art of developing quality fermented beverages through applied research. So you will see many examples of different research we have done with the Academy. But it's also a brand dedicated to education and reception. It's what I'm doing there with you, but we also welcome people in our campus to share the knowledge about fermentation. And because we are not in France today, I want to make you travel with me. So again, it's the headquarters in Lille, France. You see the building here. Here, it's our Caspar Schutz design brewery. It's unique in the world. We have 50 fermenters, small fermenters, to explore many different fermentation options. We can try all our yeasts for the same batch at the same time. We have bigger fermenter too. We also have an analytical lab at the second floor for many different applications. And one of the most important things is the sensory analysis lab. You will hear more about this one in a few minutes, but very important to really study what the human being is able to detect, because sometimes the lab is telling you something, but the human being is telling you something different. And as I was saying, it's also a place to welcome a lot of people, organize events around fermentation. Could be on wine, could be on wheat beer, could be on spirits, could be for other topics. But very nice place to work and to welcome people. Also, we have a cool reception area. So the shape you see there, it's a kind of gigantic yeast cell. And you will see in a few seconds that we have a bar here to welcome all our guests with 8 beers on tap, all produced in our pilot brewery. Like that, our customers, they can taste beer produced with our yeast, of course. So in the near future, if you are coming in France, in Lille, in Belgium, don't hesitate to contact us. I will be happy to welcome you in this very nice place. But for the moment, we are here, and it's the reason why I'm there, because it's not easy for you to travel to France, so we are doing our best to travel all across the world to spread this knowledge. And let's start with a few basics before to enter into the relationship between yeast and hops. And really, I like to start by showing this graph. So it's something you have already seen in the past for sure. So it's a phylogenetic tree of yeast. So you have thousands and thousands of yeast species coming from different places in the world. And today, we maybe know 1% of all the yeast species in the world. So it's very huge. It's an important work to know and to discover more about this microorganism. And it's the reason why I like to show this slide. And to give you a concrete example, the lager yeast is a good one because it's clearly something that, contrary to the popular belief, we are dealing with lager yeast since maybe 200 years, really. And it's a result of exploration, chance, and selection. Because according to you, from where do you think lager yeast are coming? The Saccharomyces pastorialis. Which country?
Germany.
Yeah. So yeah, many people, the answer I have most of the time, Germany or Czech Republic. And in fact, it's only 50% of the answer, because we know that 50% of the genome is the same that Saccharomyces cerevisiae. The other 50%, it's still not clear. We have hypotheses, but it's not 100% defined. And in fact, one paper published in 2004 by American researcher, I can send you the link if you want. They have discovered that the same 50% genome was present on specific tree which grow only in Patagonia, so extreme south of Argentina. The theory they had is that because of the exploration of Magellan, like in the 16th century, by chance he brought some of this yeast with them on the boat, going back to Europe, and after, during centuries, German brewers, Czech brewers, they have done this work of selection. At the beginning, they were working with crazy yeast, and generation after generation, they have selected the lager yeast we know today. But again, it's only one hypothesis, because other studies have been published saying that part of the genome have been discovered in China, so it's still not clear, which is weird because we deal every day with this product and we don't know from where it's coming from exactly. So what do we do at Fermentis when we have selected a yeast? How we produce that? How we multiplicate the yeast? So you have to know that all our yeast, they are stored in different yeast bank in different places. In the case that we have an explosion, a fire, whatever, we have multiple yeast bank. So it's stored in cryotube at minus 80 degrees C. Once we have selected a good yeast and we want to produce it in mass quantity, we will send it to our plant in Belgium. You have to know that maybe 80% of the yeast you are using, they are produced in Belgium, and after they are sent in another plant in Normandy, west of France, to be packaged in small sachets. So what we do, we start from this cryotube, and we have a state of multiplication in lab. So we go from a Van der flask to Carlsberg flask, and here we have around 3 liters of biomass. After that, we move to the industrial process, and here really what we want to do is to create a maximum of biomass. And for that, we will use what we call the fed batch method. So you can take that as a recipe in your kitchen. We will bring a certain amount of oxygen, a certain amount of nutrients to feed the yeast and allow it to multiplicate. And depending the yeast strain, the recipe, the fed batch method will be different. So you have the fermentation and commercial generation. Once we have enough biomass, we will centrifuge and put that on a vacuum filter. At this stage, we have a kind of pasta. we go through an extruder, and after it goes to the drying plant. And the drying plant is working with a fluidized air bed, meaning that the yeast is dry by the bottom. And if we look deeply at what is happening inside the yeast, so you see the yeast replication scheme on the left, and of course, all the yeast cells, they are not synchronized in their reproduction. So what we are doing is that thanks to the fed batch method, at one moment we are able to say to the yeast that they have to stop to replicate. So we want to make sure that once we have achieved the fermentation, once we have enough biomass, all the yeast cells are like what you see just on the top of the stop word. Like that, they are really able to ferment at this stage. And what we do also is that we bring enough reserve materials for the yeast, so trialols and sterols. Trialols for growth and sterol for protection. For what? To making sure that the yeast is able to resist to the drying process, which is quite stressful for the yeast. And after that, the yeast is in kind of dormant state, meaning that the yeast you will use the day of your homebrew will be exactly the same yeast that the one which was in the plant. It hasn't moved at all. It was in a sleepy state. So what you see here that before drying, you have between 25 to 30% of dry matter, and after drying, you have around 95% of dry matter. Explaining why the best thing to do for you to keep the yeast is to put it in the fridge. I know that some people, they want to put it in the freezer, but it's not useful because you don't have any water anymore, so you don't freeze anything. So that's for the production process. Again, we'll look a bit deeply into the yeast cell to see what is happening there. So I really like this slide. Don't worry, I will not go into details because it's really complicated, but it's also the reason why I like it. It's like that you understand quickly that it's a complicated topic. And our job at Fermentis is to understand all this metabolic pathway to make it so that the yeast will bring you what you want. So the most popular pathway, it's what you see from the top, starting with glucose and fructose, and it will go through different reactions to produce ethanol at the end. Basically, the yeast is making alcohol, not a surprise. But after you have many other pathways to create higher alcohol, acetate ester, acetic ester, so things you could want in some beer style. For example, the most popular higher alcohol is isoamyl alcohol, and it will bring you the banana notes, so something you could want in Belgian and Abbey style, for example. But depending how the yeast work, it could also produce diacetyl, for example. So diacetyl would bring the butter notes. It could also produce acetaldehyde, the green apple notes, or something we don't want. H2S, how to say that? The not good egg taste that you don't want. So many reactions which are all linked from a way or another. So it's really complex to understand and to select the good yeast. And on the top right, you see how the yeast can interact with the hops, with the precursor, to generate and to make detectable specific compounds that we will see into the presentation, like 4-MMP, 3-MH, 3-MH acetate, which will bring you interesting notes of grapefruit, passion fruit, lemon, this kind of interesting notes. But key point is to remember about that yeast are living microorganisms which produce alcohol to produce energy and grow. They don't do that because brewers and homebrewers, they want to make alcohol. They do that for themselves. The yeasts produce aromas and or flavor as byproducts. It's only like a co-product, but it's not important for the yeast. What the yeast is doing is to replicate. They don't care if they produce H2S, ethyl acetate, acetate ester. It's not their problem. So it's our job to understand how it's working to take advantage of that. And again, the goal of the yeast is to replicate and ensure its survival. And it's only because of that that we exploit these properties to produce fermented beverages. So now that we have put the basics, let's go into our topic of the day with exploring the art of fermentation with different Fermentis Academy studies and with a big focus on the interaction between yeast and hops. And let's start with biotransformation. But before to talk about biotransformation, let's agree on what we are talking about. Because when I say biotransformation, for you, what it means. If it links to one ingredient, which one it is? So what do we have? Yeast? Something else? Hops? Okay. Yeah, so hops and yeast, that's true. But if we take the scientific definition, the biotransformation refers to biochemical transformation involving particular compound, drug, or xenobiotic. It's part of the metabolism of an organism. Why I put that on screen? It's because, specific interaction happening between yeast and hop. It's one biotransformation, but it could happen between many other ingredients. And to give you a particular example, let's take this one. I suppose you have all produced Belgian beer in the past, and you have phenolic notes. The phenolic notes, what we call the positive character, is an example of biotransformation. The yeast is using the precursor present in the malt, like the butyric acid, to convert that into 4-vinyl phenol, 4-vinyl guaiacol, 4-vinyl glycategol, the compounds which will bring the clove notes. So yes, biotransformation is related to hops, but not only. It's what I wanted to point out before to start. But of course today, in the general language, when we talk about biotransformation, we all talk about interaction between yeast and hops. So let's see how the yeast can help to enhance the hop aroma. So here we will focus on the sialic compounds. I know that we also have the terpenes, but we'll do a big focus on this study on the sials. And the sial, you have two different forms. You have the alcoholic form. It's what you see here on screen. So basically, the sial, it's a ramification of 6 carbon. So you can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's when you have an angle, it's a carbon with a group alcohol, the group OH, and a group sulfanyl, the group LCH in green. And all the complex names you have probably seen in the past, like 3MH, 3MHA, 4MNP. Finally, they are not that complicated to understand. It's linked to where the group sulfanyl or alcohol are placed on the ramification of carbon. So here, for example, the sulfanyl group is on the carbon 3, reason why we call it 3-sulfanyl hexane 1O. 1 because the group alcohol is on the carbon 1. And when you synthesize that, we call that 3HO. So it's the alcohol form, but we also have the acetate form of the sial. And it's important because depending if you have at the end in your beer the alcohol form or the acetate form, you will not have the same aromatic. And what is the difference? It's because here you had what we call an esterification. An esterification is a reaction between an alcohol, so the alcohol version of the thiol you see at the top, and an acid. It's what we call the esterification. And here you see that we don't have a group alcohol anymore. We have an acetate group. So it's important to remember that you have these two forms all the time. Here you have different siol compounds involved in the study. We will have a look. So now I have explained how it works. You understand why we can synthesize all these complex names that I will not read, otherwise I will do a mistake, by 3SH or 3SHA. So 3-sulfanyl hexane 1-O, in fact. And all of them, they will bring different aromas. So could be passion fruit, could be citrus, could be grapefruit, could be some floral notes. I will not enter into details about them. So what is happening when we are looking at the metabolic pathways? So here it's the same scheme than the one you have seen on the slide before, but much more synthesized. And we will have a look deeply on the green square. What is happening there is that outside of the yeast, at the beginning, the siol, they are linked with the precursor inside the hops. You have two different types of precursor. The cysteine, which is an amino acid, and a glutathione, which is a tripeptide. These two organisms, originally what they are doing for hops, they have a role of stabilization. They stabilize the membrane of hop cells. It's what they are doing. The yeasts, they will work with these compounds and they will cut the link between the cysteine and the siol, or the glutathione and the siol, to release them into the aromatic, their structure where they are detectable by the human being. The moment where you will be able to detect passion fruit or other aromas. So it's what we will have a look here. So we wanted to study the impact of the yeast on this process, and do we see differences between the yeast? Do they have different capacity to release the siol in their detectable form? So what we have done here is that we haven't brewed a real beer for this study. We have worked with synthetic siol to better control everything in the lab. And so we have cysteine adduct and glutathione adduct. We mix that with different fermented yeast. We put that into a non-opt wort during 7 days at 24 degrees C and 3 days at 4 degrees C. And at the end, we had a look on the components which has been released. So starting with the conversion rate from the cysteine adduct. Here you have three different compounds, the 3SP in this alcohol and acetate form, the 3S4MP, again alcohol and acetate, and 3SH, alcohol and acetate. We have studied here 5 different yeasts, the Sarthea K97, S33, USO5, SO4, and B856. And the conclusion we can do from this different graph here is just in synthesis. You have a high esterification of the 3SPO and 3S4MPO. So remember that I said that depending if you have the alcohol form or the acetate form, you don't have the same taste at the end. Generally speaking, the K97 seems to be the highest siol release efficiency. You see every time that it's the higher graph between the four. And last but not least, S33 and SO4, if they don't have the same capacities as K97, it seems that they have a greater ability to esterify the alcohol form, like for example the 3SPO, and convert it into the acetate form. So here, if you take the ratio for S33, for example, what you see in red is much more present than what you see in blue. So you will have much more the acetate form, meaning that you will be able to change the taste you will have at the end. So here it was for cysteine. If we do the same thing from the glutathione adduct, we have more or less the same conclusion. Again, K97 seems to be the highest thiol release efficiency. And this time we don't have a good conversion from glutathione with these two compounds, but with the 3SH, it seems that SO4 again and BT56 are the best to esterify the 3SH all into 3SH acetate. Just, I'm moving my. Oh, yeah, that's good. So yeah, I was saying that here you can see on the third graph that SO4 and BT56, they have good capacity to convert 3SHO into 3SH acetate. So the fraction of the red is bigger than the blue fraction. So if I convert that into very synthesized and simplified results, what does it mean? It means that you have potentially 4 good yeasts for release the thiol, the Sapphire K87 with excellent thiol release capacity, generally speaking, the Sapphire S33 with good esterification capacity from cysteine precursors, the Sapphire SO4 with good esterification from cysteine and glutathione precursor, and the Sapphire BT56 with good esterification from glutathione precursor. But here it was, you could say, a very lab study, let's say, because it was not a real brew. So let's move to another study when we have actually brewed a beer. And for this one, I have chosen to share with you an applied research we have done to study the interaction between yeast and one single hop variety. We have chosen the Cascade because at that time it was probably the most popular hop variety in the world. It's still today, I think, overpassed by Citra in some part of the world, but it's still in the top 3 for sure. And what we have done here is that we have mixed our 11 yeast, so 3 lager, 7 ale, among them 3 positive yeast, with hops. So you have late and dry hopping, so 200 grams per hectoliter in both cases. And we have compared that also with a Blanco, so just the yeast and no hops addition. And at the end, we have done a detailed sensory analysis study and also analytics study in the lab. So first, let's have a look to the sensory analysis. So I know that it's a lot. I will just give you a few information you have to check. First of all, you can see that with the Blanco and with the hops, we have a difference in the general aromatic profile, because here you don't have detection of hoppy expression, of herbal, floral, of citric, of tropical. For all the yeast, it was nothing, which is normal because we had no hops in this beer. Here you see that we see a difference, so that's a good thing to start. Also, you start to see few interesting stuff. Again, it's a lot of graphs, so it's not easy to read everything in detail, but I invite you to have a look to the phenolic chlorine character. So again, it's what the panelist has described. And we realized that for all the yeasts which were POV positive, obviously panelists, they have described it as phenolic, but it seems that the phenolic flavor play against the hoppy aromas, because all the yeast you are seeing there, if you look at the hoppy expression, all this aroma you see there, they are at the bottom. So it's quite logic, but it seems that POV positive yeast, in the case of hoppy beer recipe, is not a good choice. And again, we start to see interesting trends. For example, in general hoppy expression, the K97 is higher than the others. For the floral expression, we could have potentially the S33. For hop tropical, we could have also the K97. So we start to see interesting things. and we will compare that to the results we had in the lab. So what you see here is a summary of analysis of the hop compounds, so monoterpene alcohol, the esters, and the terpenes released in the beer. And here you have also interesting things. In ester production, F33 is a good candidate, also in monoterpene alcohol. But remember that I said that we study all the time sensory analysis on one side and analytics on the other side, because sometimes the lab is saying you something, but it's not absolutely true. And the best example here will be, for example, the B134, because it has a good amount of monoterpene alcohol, like geraniol, citronellol. So the compounds will bring you citrus notes, for example. But the B134, what you don't show here, it's not visible here, that B134 is POF positive. So despite the fact that it's a good geraniol citronellol producer, with the POF character, you will not feel it at the end of your beer. So it's important to compare with sensory analysis. Another example is the sum of terpene production. Here you see that K97 is not that high. If we end the study there, we could conclude that K97 is not a good candidate to interact with Cascade. But when we have done the sensory analysis, we see that we have panelists saying that you have good hoppy expression with this yeast. Obviously, I didn't mention, but the panelists, they don't know what they are tasting. And before to move forward, I have a question for you. Amongst all of you who have already seen this kind of graph, what we call a PCA, a principal component analysis. No one? Yeah, so it's the reason why, like 3 months ago, I didn't have this slide, and I realized that many people have never seen a PCA. And it's important because it's something which will come back in many studies we are doing. Basically, what it is, it's statistic analytic data, and we will convert a multi-dimensional study in a two-dimensional study with the axis X and Y. Why? To simplify the pattern recognition of the data analysis with graphics. And how it works, so here it's a completely different example of the study we are dealing with right now. It's a study around phenolics notes and phenolic compound products. And we will convert all the components of the study into what you see here as red line. So you see, for example, 4EG, 4EP here, ethyl octanoate, phenylethyl alcohol production, and closer red line is from one axis, more it's explained by this axis. So meaning that the 4EG, 4EP parameter is well correlated in this direction with the axis X. Once we have implemented that into the matrix, we will convert the variable, the yeast, into non-correlated variable. So basically, we place into the graph, thanks to a data analysis method, the yeast in this case. So you see SAF ART58, SAF Rubia 8, SAF ARS33. And the only job we have to do at the end is to say, okay, here we want beer which are good in terms of 4EG, 4EP release, because in this case we are dealing with bread beers. So you know that because the red line linked to 4EG, 4EP is going into this direction, it means that all the yeasts which will appear in this part of the graph are theoretically, or from a data analysis point of view, good producer of 4EG, 4EP. And here you see the Sabru BR8, which is there, which makes sense because it's our Brettanomyces. So it's normal that you have 4 EG and 4 EP production. In other terms, PCA, you can just take that as hypoglycemia. Have you already heard about this word before? So I have a question. Are you able to read this text? So basically, hypoglycemia is a phenomenon which is explained by the fact that we only need the first and the last letter of a word to read it. And the PCA is exactly the same thing. Into a multidimensional universe, we'll keep only 2 to explain the study. So I was explaining that because coming back to our study, we have now this PCA. So you find the different variables you have seen before for the sensory analysis, like hop airborne, phenolic, hop tropical, etc. And you see that the yeast are positioned in blue at different parts of the graph. Also, something that I missed to tell you, you will see percent on each PCA. And from the data analysis point of view, we say that we need minimum 50% here to say that we explain the majority of the study. But here we don't see very well because you have phenolic on one side and all the rest on the other side. So what we have done is that let's remove this variable phenolic because it's not something we want in hoppy beers anyway. So once I remove the phenolic character, it's much more readable. And you see that all the characteristics we want for a hoppy beer produced with Cascade are on the right. Hop tropical, hop airborne, fruity, general hoppy expression, meaning that we have to look at this part of the graph to find interesting yeast for this aspect. And here you have the Sapphire K97, the Sapphire S33, and the Sapphire S189, meaning that they are the 3 good options for interaction or to better enhance the aromatic of Cascade. So you see, it's important that for you to understand that when we are doing recommendation, it's always coming with a lot of background. We are not just sitting around the bar saying that this yeast is good for hoppy beer because we have produced IPA once with that, and we are like, okay, that's good. All the words you could see on our website are coming from somewhere. Sometimes I tend to say that we are a bit too much scientific because it takes years to have something released just in terms of communication. And for you to know, like, for example, we study between the moment we produce the beer in our pilot brewery for scientific purpose and the moment that we have this PowerPoint created, it's a minimum of 8 months. And I let you imagine the amount of variables we could potentially study. So I understand sometimes we could be slow to release new stuff or communicate, but we want to be sure about what we are saying, and we have really a scientific approach. And let's move with a last study. This time I will share with you how we build a yeast recommendation for a specific beer style. And we'll take the example of the Hazy IPA. Why? Because again, I like to share how we do that because it could seem simple when you see on the table of different beer styles with recommendation of yeast. But really it's coming from a lot of studies, not just a word for us. So I will skip quickly this part because I'm doing this presentation globally, but as we are in the US, you all know the story of New England IPA / Hazy IPA, so I will not say too much about that. You all know that it's now a BGCP category by itself, very popular. I invite you to follow the trend of the different brewing software like Brewers Friends, Beersmith, etc. It's crazy when you follow the amount of recipe created year by year. After 2018, 18, you have like a peak of Hazy IPA. So really interesting. And it's the reason why we have made the choice to focus on this type to know what could be the best yeast to help you to brew this beer style. So what we are doing, what we have done, and what we are doing in the case of every beer style is just that we put the base of what is this beer style, what is the definition of this beer, generally speaking. So in the case of Hazy IPA, of course, we need juiciness, so equivalent of drinking ripe, overripe fruity juice. We need haziness, a pale color, intense hop aroma and flavor. Natural malt profile, it's not something we want. We don't want a lot of bitterness neither, and we want a good body. And here, in terms of color, you can see the expectation, but we don't focus too much on that as it's more related to malt. Once we have put the basis, we have defined one type of Hazy IPA recipe. We have used 3 hop varieties, Citra, Simcoe, and Mosaic, and we have evaluated 2 lager yeast and 7 ale, among them 2 puff positive. And here you have the full recipe. So with all the yeast on the left, S33, SO4, SO5, K97, B856, B134, T58, and 2 lager, S23 and S189. You have the wort on the top, the mashing regime. So it was not only one temperature. As we are close to Belgium, we tend to follow the mashing method we are doing in Belgium and in the north of France. You see the hop regime. It has been fermented at 70 degrees Fahrenheit and maturated at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and after centrifugate. And we want to answer to 2 main questions. First, does the yeast can influence the intensity of hop character? If we don't care about specific aromatic, can we enhance a specific one by switching the yeast? And on another side, does the yeast can influence the type of notes brought by hops? If we are using the same hops, if you change the yeast, can you change the aromatic? And we'll try to answer to these 2 questions. And so for that, we have worked with our Fermentis beer panel. So here you see some picture on the left. So the sensory analysis team is basically a team of 3 persons. One is missing there, but you have Gabriela Montono. She's Brazilian. She is BJCP BHR certified, and she's our head of sensory analysis. You have Colleen with there. Colleen is coming from the wine world, and she has also a PhD in sensory analysis. And finally, he's not on the picture, but we have Thomas. Thomas is more into spirits, and he's our technical lab guy for the sensory analysis. And how it works is that we have 2 different ways of working. We have an internal way, more for the beer side, with different trained panel. So today we have between 40 and 60 trained panelists who are coming every week to taste beers. And they are divided into 3 panels. The one we call the research panel, dedicated to R&D project, development, and broadview, generally speaking. The fermentation panel, trained panel dedicated to fermentative flavor. So for example, they have helped to produce the yeast and Cascade interaction study. People who are into this panel, they are not specifically like beer fan or beer geek, but they are trained to taste very small differences between 2 beers. So could be about bitterness, could be about banana notes, could be about specific stuff like that. And finally, you have the general panel. In my case, I'm part of this one, and it's a trained panel dedicated to ingredients, flavor, and interaction. So here you have people. You don't have only beer experts or beer judge, because it's not something we want. At the end, we want beer that's people like random people we like, because brewers, they want to sell beers to random people. They don't want to sell beer to beer geek only. But they all were they yeah they are all a bit interested about beer. So they have tried different beer styles. They are trained on different beer styles. But again, when we are doing a study, even me, I'm doing the effort to not know what we are doing. So in this case, if we come back to Hazy IPA, when we arrive in front of 11 Hazy IPA beers, in my case, I have to control myself and to not say to the crowd, we are studying Hazy IPA. Otherwise, I create a bias in the study. So here it's quite obvious, because when you see Hazy IPA, it's easy to recognize. But in more specific beer style, some people, they don't know. And in this case, me or other beer judge, we have to make the effort to not say anything, to not create a bias. So let's talk about the results. First, from a visual point of view, the turbidity level. We have ranked from 0 to 8 the opacity, turbidity of the beer, and you see that we already have few candidates interesting, be it 5.6, K97, SO4, S33, USO5, in terms of haziness, so from a visual point of view only. And if we have a look to the aromatic, again, here you have a lot of data, so it's complicated to find already interesting results, but you have trends. For example, let's take the phenolic notes. You can already say that B134, we will not use it in a Hazy IPA because we don't want phenols in a Hazy IPA. T58 in gray is a producer of fermentation fruity notes, so more apple, banana, and it's also something we don't want a lot. So we could probably already eliminate T58. On the other side, on the positive side, on hop tropical, it seems that we have a trend with S33. Hop character, generally speaking, we have the K97. Juicy character, S33 again. So we have to investigate, but we already have a trend. And when we have done this part of the job, we wanted to answer the question, what juicy mean exactly? Because when the Hazy IPA trend arrived, everybody started to use this word juicy, 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 but we never put a real definition of what is juicy. So we have studied the correlation between all these variables to explain what is juicy from a scientific point of view. And it's what we figured out. We have a positive correlation. So when people say beer is juicy, we find a positive correlation with all the hop character and the turbidity level. And at the opposite, a negative correlation with bitterness. So from now, we say that juicy is when beer is hoppy, generally speaking, any kind of hops, and with a lot of turbidity. And now we are back with a PCA. So now that I have explained or tried to explain what is a PCA, maybe you could do the job for me and tell me where we have to look on the graph to find interesting yeast for Hazy IPA. If you look at the orange line in this case, which characteristic we want in a Hazy IPA? Juicy. So which part of the graph? Exactly. So it's good. It means that I have. It's good for me that I have succeeded at least partially to explain what is a PCA. That's a good thing. But you understand that we have 4 potentially interesting yeasts, be it 5.6, K97, S33, and SO4. Why? Because all the characteristics we want in an Hazy IPA, are there: hop character, body, hop citric, hop fruity, turbidity level, etc. And we have to compare that with the analytics. So we have analyzed the hop compounds produced or released by the yeast in the beer. We have aggregated that in total to make it easier to read. And you see that in the lab, K97 remains good option, S33 also. B256 seems here, at least when we look like that, less interesting. And again, we put all these variables on the PCA. Here, it's completely impossible to read anything. I agree. But you can still see some stuff. For example, the beta-myrcene variable is on the top right. And you have to know that, for example, in Cascade, beta-myrcene represents 60% of the total hop compounds. And total hop oil, generally speaking, is on the right. So we can say that we have to look on the right part of the graph to see interesting yeast from an analytical point of view. And when I remove the line, you see 3 yeasts on the right, SO4, F33, and K97. Finally, we can exclude B256 because in the lab we haven't seen enough hop compounds produced by this yeast, from our point of view at least. And now that we have 3 good candidates, we can simplify the spider graph we have seen before. So you have in this pattern on the top right, and on an axis on the left, and it's working with in percent of descriptors frequency. So it's a percent of time the panelists have described the beers produced with this yeast on a specific aroma. So what we can see, for example, the Sapphire S33, which is in red, for tropical fruits, seems to be really interesting. For passion fruit, mango, pineapple. For more floral notes, so floral, jasmine, resinous, K97 seems to be the good option. And SO4 is more like all around, but you have a trend around apricots and stone fruits, generally speaking. And of course, all of them, they are good in terms of body and haziness. And so now you have 3 good candidates for experimentation. K97, as I said, more floral, resiny. SO4, more dedicated to stone fruits, notes, peach, apricots. And Sapphire S33 for mango, pineapple, passion fruit notes. And the 3 of them, they will bring you the essential characteristic of a Hazy IPA: no bitterness, or not a lot, haziness, and tropical or hoppy notes, generally speaking. In conclusion of these 3 examples of studies, you can remember the following. For the theoretical sire release, you have 4 candidates: BH56, K97, N33, and SO4. To work well in interaction with Cascade, you still have S33 and K97, but also a lager option, the SY89. And last but not least, to brew Hazy IPA, you have 3 options: N33, SO4, and K97. So that's the conclusion we can do after this 3 study. But again, take account of the fact that you have many variables in our universe. So what I'm saying there, it's not the absolute truth. So if you want to experiment with something different, please do it. And we are very happy to hear what people are doing, because sometimes we learn, and it's not sometimes, it's happening every time, we learn things from brewers, from home brewers. Here's the example, because I'm sure that I will have the question after. I don't know if you pitch directly or if you reiterate, but in fact, it's because many brewers, when we discussed with them 10 years, 15 years ago, I mean, I wasn't there, but when my colleagues were discussing with them, Brewers were saying, I don't read rate, I simply pitch direct. And Fermentis was like, oh, interesting. And so we have done a study to demonstrate that that's true. You don't need to read rate because with all the scientific background behind, we are totally sure that you will have the same results. So it's one example amongst thousands. So that's all for now. Remember to keep in touch with us. So we have a free Fermentis app. We have the website. And I invite you to always double check the information because I don't know if you are using brewing softwares, but these guys are doing a great job. But most of the time it's one guy alone or just passionate people. It's not their full-time job. And it's complicated for them to keep updated about all the yeast characteristics, all the hops characteristics, all the malt characteristics. And so the data they have, sometimes it's not accurate. So I always invite you to double check with our website or with our app. One example could be the attenuation. On brewing software, it could be 60% or 80%. And on our website, it would be the opposite. And it changed completely your expectation at the end. So it's one thing I can say. After, by scanning the QR code, you can have all my contacts. So LinkedIn, my email, my phone, etc. So from now, if you have any question, don't hesitate. And if you want to follow us on social media, please do it because we communicate different studies, different things time to time, and you will also have access to the list of all the events we are doing worldwide. So I know that if it's in Singapore, it will be complicated for you to attend, but sometimes we are not so far from you, and maybe you could join. So it's that's a nice city. I've been there like 6 times. That's great. So, time for question. Could be about this presentation. I will give you a presentation anyway, so you will have it. Could be about this presentation or any other topics. I will be happy to answer.
So, what is your favorite type of beer?
So it depends. What I was saying to Paul before to start is that when I come in the US, I'm more in the OP beers. Why? Because in Europe and in France in particular, we don't have access to the same hop varieties, and it's much more expensive in France. Like, we are able to produce a lot of bittering hops, but not so much aromatic varieties. So for these reasons, brewers they can't afford to put the same quantity than you put in the US in the beer. So when I'm in the US, I have to say that I'm much more around hoppy beers. When I'm in France, no, I'm good with old traditional German lager because French brewer, you have to know that the craft beer trends have maybe followed 10 years later in France than in the US. So if you take the number of breweries per habitant, we have more breweries in France than the US. It's too much. And at some point, the market will not be big enough for everyone. But for this reason, they are trying to do only crazy stuff time to time. And yeah, it's funny to have like, I don't know, apricot beer, curry beer, curcuma beer. But when you taste a very good lager, for me, it means a lot about the level of a brew because it's really complicated to do. So now I'm more into that mood. And globally, I have to say that it's definitely the trend of 2025. It's the lager, generally speaking, any style, because in terms of course, I have access to the yeast market globally, and all lager yeasts, in terms of volume, they are really rising. In comparison of 5-6 years ago, it's crazy.
Huh. And what city in the US is your favorite?
No, for real, I can show you the text after because I was discussing with one of my colleagues who is based in Houston, and I was saying 2 days ago that New Orleans is probably my top 2 after San Francisco.
Well, We all speak French, so, you know.
Whoa.
So, no, so
If you took the right, you know, language courses in high school, you still may speak a bit of something.
Yeah, that's good.
Is Fermentis developing any new yeast strains of the
Yeah, for sure. So you have to remember that we work with beer, wine, cider, spirits, and many other beverages. At the moment, we have released 4 yeasts for coffee fermentation. Maybe you know, maybe not, but in the process of fabrication of coffee, in the farm, you have a step of fermentation. In the past, they were working with just the yeast which were naturally present in the middle, but now to maximize their production, they would like to work with selected yeast, and we have developed product for that. So we have launched 1 month ago, 2 months ago, 4 products, and this year, just for brewing, I hope to release in the home market 3 new yeasts. So one I can already tell you about will be a lager yeast. Should be available to buy in the US, I would say September. It's a lager yeast dedicated to hoppy beer. So the best example would be New Zealand Pilsner. And it's a yeast we have dedicated on this aspect. And also, you have to check our website time to time because I know that it's complicated to see the information. But for example, the last year, so end of November, we have launched a lager yeast called Lager E30. So I'm not sure that you have heard about this one. And why E30? For ester. So could seem weird because normally it's not something we want in a lager. But for this one, we have selected this yeast in Southeast Asia. So I was talking about Singapore, but especially like Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam. We have done the sensory analysis there, and based on the sensory analysis, we realized that people, they prefer lager with a minimum amount of ester. So during tasting, they are not able to say that I detect banana, I detect ester. It's just that amongst 4 beers, they always prefer the one with a minimum amount of esters. They just feel a little twist. So we have selected this yeast on this aspect. It will bring you the level of ester just above the threshold. It's nothing in comparison of a Belgian yeast, for example, but it's very interesting. For example, for rice lager, could be an option. If you want to do a Hazy Sapporo clone, it's a very good yeast. But yeah, many things are coming.
That's exciting.
And you optimize any of your lager yeast for fresh fermentation?
Yeah, so we have this question all the time. It has pros and cons to ferment under pressure. You really have to remember that yeast is a living microorganism, so it's just like us. We prefer to work under 20 degrees C with everything well around, that under 45 degrees C, and many people behind you telling you work faster, work better, work faster. So it's exactly the same thing for the yeast. By putting it under pressure, you will stress it. So you will reduce the amount of some volatiles, but you will create also other aromatics. So it's a matter of calculation. Never go too high in terms of pressure. I would have to convert, but I would say 10 psi, not much more. But yeah, it has pros and cons. It's something we can discuss after, but yeah, a perfect answer doesn't exist.
Also keep in mind to add to that, if you're adding fine agents and you're fermenting under pressure, you're adding shit to something that's carbonated. That's a problem. I've learned that lesson over this. You're adding fine agents, you're adding it with carbonated beverage. That's good.
Yeah, and we know
Yeah, I
that.
can't keep on going under 10%. Like I do some pressure fermentation, like under 10, mostly on 5.
Yeah, and we know that dissolved CO2 is a stressful agent for the yeast. You mean at which moment would be the best?
Like, well, I mean, that's going to be my second point. Which month would be the best? But if you are doing the biotransformation content, is that really best with the yeast or
We haven't studied this part of the question.
Yeah, then the second part would be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, what would be the best?
Again, I don't have a precise answer on this aspect here, but generally speaking, of course, you have to do your dry hop when the fermentation is still active. So generally, I would say dry hop after 2 days and another one after 4 days, kind of the classic pattern we see most of the time. But it's not a perfect answer all the time.
So when you trouble Fermentis publishes the yeast integration, how do they determine what that brand is? Do they take into account
Sorry, I haven't heard anything. Can you repeat? I haven't heard anything.
So when Fermentis publishes yeast attenuation so a yeast attenuation rate might be from like 74 to 82%. What is that range based on? Is it based on mash temp, yeast health, aeration? So in terms of how do we gauge, how do we get that final graph? What's the best thing?
Yeah, so to give you the general characteristic of the yeast, so could be the attenuation, could be the amount of ester produced, etc. We have done what we do a baseline study, meaning that we have done the most neutral brews possible, like no hops addition, just 100% pills. I don't remember exactly the recipe. We have put all our yeast in the same condition, and it's thanks to this baseline study that we're able to give recommendation about attenuation in all you see on the typical datasheet. It's coming from this study with all the yeast side by side.
So I felt like to kind of piggyback what you said, when you're doing a study, like you was asking about mash temperatures, because obviously you're going to get different.
Yeah.
So is it like something based on 152?
Yeah, that's it. So you can go on our website and in a section tips and tricks or something for brewers advice, or I don't remember by heart, but we have not a catalog but a document called tips and tricks. You can read it online, and it's 42 pages about all our yeast. So you have all the attenuation, all the phenolic production, and it will answer exactly to your question. You have all the characteristics of the recipe, from where it's coming, etc. etc. So here it's 42 pages. I have written it partially, and if you are interested about winemaking, I have written 150 pages. So you can find all this documentation online.
Okay, so go ahead and answer this. If you want to answer more questions after.
Okay.
But yeah, we can let you stand up. You got your phone up.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
This is weird. Close it. Alright, we will close this. Alright. Thanks everybody for joining.